It's a pleasure for me to speak again to the Turkey AI Week. It's not my first time. I've actually done it last year, along with Forum IA, which is the main cluster that we have here in Quebec. This year they were unavailable, so I decided to take over and to basically, speak to you for 20 minutes about what makes Montreal such a great collaborative environment for R&D projects, but also in general for the development of artificial intelligence field. A few words about Montreal International. We're, as I said, the Greater Montreal Area's Economic Development Agency. We have three main mandates. The first one is to attract and retain in Montreal international talent, whether foreign students or skilled workers. The second one is to attract and retain international organizations, which I'll touch base actually during my presentation because it's relevant to the topic today. And the last segment of activity for which I work is for indirect investment attraction. We're a team of about 85 people. And what's quite unique about our business model is that we're a public-private partnership, meaning that we get a lot of money from the three levels of government, but also a fair share from the private sector. So basically, you should see me as a free consultant if ever we have to work together over the following months or years. So let me deep dive into the topic, into today's topic. Basically, what makes Montreal a great collaborative environment in artificial intelligence. Obviously, I cannot start without explaining how great Montreal actually is in those fields. To me, it comes down to a few key factors. The first one is obviously the very high quality of the talent that we have in Montreal. And that all comes down to the research that has been done over the past 30 years or so in Montreal. So we have around 1,600 university researchers, whether professors, PhDs, assistants, and so on, which basically is the densest such concentration in the world. So that explains why Montreal is such a cutting-edge destination when it comes to research and development in artificial intelligence. Obviously, that research doesn't come from nowhere. Montreal is the city in Canada that receives the most funding for university research. And we're also deemed one of the best university cities in the world. We're usually on par with Boston for the America region. So basically, Montreal, Boston, both the 15 university institutions, which again is the largest number in Canada. Obviously, there's some other factors which explain why a lot of companies choose Montreal: the overall low operating cost, the very high quality of life. But what's very interesting, and I'll touch base again on this, is the funding available for companies active in artificial intelligence, which has been a true catalyst for private sector initiatives in the industry. So as you can see, over the past 6-7 years, Montreal has been exploding in terms of private sector activities related to artificial intelligence. So it all started a few years back with Google and a few banks which decided to set up operations in Montreal, mostly research labs. So it was in partnership with universities. And then more and more companies started to invest in the region. Obviously, a lot of tech companies, think of Meta, IBM, Thales, etc. But now we're seeing more and more companies in fields other than pure information technology investing as well in the region. So, for example, we have Unity, which is basically a tool model for 3D animation, which has started its unit, its AI lab here out of Montreal. The same with Novartis, which is active in life sciences. So we're seeing companies in different industries considering Montreal and choosing Montreal as their main innovation hub and research and development facilities in North America, or at least in Canada. So as you can see, the trend has been growing over the past few years. Again, this year, we've been working with numerous companies active in artificial intelligence. I think the last figures were investments amounting to $2 billion over the past 5 years, with around 40 companies choosing Montreal as a destination for their labs. So obviously, I've been speaking of what makes Montreal a unique environment, but I'd like to deep dive now a bit on what is the key strength of the ecosystem here, which is the basis of that collaborative spirit, which I'll discuss later. So basically, Montreal, as I said, have been at the forefront of the artificial intelligence disciplines, most famously the deep learning, reinforced learning, and machine learning fields. Most of you probably know Yoshua Bengio, who's basically deemed the founder of deep learning. He's been active in Montreal for the past 30 years. He's like a rock star in Montreal. Everybody in the field knows him, and he's quite famous as well globally. He's been winning numerous prizes and has been recognized in various instances worldwide. What's very interesting is that Mr. Bengio stayed true throughout his career to his own idea of deep learning and, more globally speaking, artificial intelligence. He's truly been the keystone of the what we call AI for good and AI for humanity here in Montreal, which has always been at the center of any initiative that he's been part to. Basically, he's founded the Mila Institute, then was the scientific director. He's also been the scientific director of IVADO. I'll explain what the mandate of those two organizations in a moment. But he's also been involved in numerous other initiatives in Montreal. But as I said, he's not alone. There are 1,600 specialists in the field in Montreal. Again, the densest such concentration in the world. And here's the sample of very world-recognized researchers that we have in the region. Andrea Lodi for data science, Doina Prekop and Joël Pinault, very well known at McGill University. And at French-speaking university, Aaron Corville and Simon Lacoste-Julien, who are also very famous in simulations and machine learning. So basically, we have a key concentration of researchers, which I have to say, all contribute to the private sector initiatives. All the labs that you saw on the timeline, each of those projects have been working with the academic world in Montreal. So they all partner up directly with the researchers. Before going into the details as to how that collaboration happens, let me put emphasis on one key aspect of the development of the ecosystem over the past few years. I did mention the funding at the university level, which has been very, very important over the past few years in AI. But what's been very interesting in Canada is that both the federal and provincial governments, so the federal government of Canada and the provincial government of the province of Quebec, have been putting a lot of money, close to $800 million Canadian, in the AI ecosystem, whether for the development of new technologies or the adoption of the technologies developed here in Quebec. So, for example, the Canadian supercluster active in artificial intelligence called Scale AI has its HQ here in Montreal. And they have as well satellite offices connecting the dots with the rest of the country, for example, in Toronto, Waterloo area, and in Edmonton. So basically, Montreal is not a unique ecosystem centered in itself. It also collaborates with the ecosystems that we have elsewhere in Canada. The same goes on for the Quebec AI cluster called Forum IA, which received $100 million to sustain initiatives in the artificial intelligence field to make sure that what is developed here in Montreal also happens elsewhere in Quebec, that the dots are connected with what the companies need in the province and what is actually developed at the university level. Again, I'll touch base on the mandate of Forum IA in a few minutes. So deep diving into the heart of what makes Montreal such a unique collaborative environment. Keep in mind that two organizations were implemented over the past 20 years or so. The first one is called Mila, which is dedicated to fundamental research in the artificial intelligence industry. So basically, Mila is a gathering of close to 900 researchers and PhDs and they basically deal with fundamental issues, fundamental research projects, right? So I decided to touch base a bit more on Ivado, which is a similar organization, not exactly the same, but it's similar enough to say that, you know, they share pretty much the same business model of partnership. So Ivado is more focused on applied research projects. So a lot of private companies, including foreign companies, choose to develop partnerships with Ivado so that they can benefit from the 1,400 researchers under their umbrella to develop applied research projects, right? So let's say you're a company and you have key aspects of your business that you'd like to develop, which would involve components of artificial intelligence, whether it is machine learning, deep learning, reinforced learning, and so on. Basically, Ivado connects the dots and makes sure that he speaks to the right researchers and scientists to help you along your project. What's great about Ivado is that it's not only about a concentration of researchers and PhDs, it's also about gathering around all the ecosystem that would be relevant for you to develop your projects. For example, we have around 19 industrial clusters in Quebec, a sample of which are mentioned here, Aero Montreal, the Zone Agtech, we have Ecotech Quebec for clean tech, and so on. So we have close to 20 such industrial clusters with which they make the bridge to make sure that whenever there's an initiative or a research project that it also fits into the mandate of those clusters. Obviously, Ivado works with pretty much every single academic institution active in data valorization and artificial intelligence in the province of Quebec. So it's not only limited to Montreal, it's Quebec-wide. And more than 40 research chairs are involved in the activities of Ivado. So basically, Ivado is truly the key to understanding how the academic world and the private sector can actually collaborate and join efforts into the development of technologies related to artificial intelligence. Now, I wanted to touch base on the fact that Montreal has not only Ivado and Mila, but also industrial clusters, which basically work on specific projects. So for example, Scale AI, which is again the Canadian supercluster, is dedicated to helping companies with anything related to supply chain issues and how to better manage the flow of merchandise and goods. So basically, this supercluster is very proactive with consortia, which basically try to address the issue of efficiency, energy efficiency, transportation efficiency, and goods production. So this is a very tangible example of how the federal government of Canada is basically supporting private sector initiatives through funding at Scale AI. Keep in mind that Scale AI will finance $1 out of $2 spent on those projects. The same goes on with Forum AI, which is Quebec's cluster in artificial intelligence. The main purpose of Forum IA is a bit different. It's mostly about gathering around the same table the universities and academic institutions, the government, the private sector, and other stakeholders at the industrial level so that we can address specific challenges facing the university. The talent pool, which is always very tight, it's never big enough for the needs of the industry. Or, for example, specific problems at the government level, which the government says, hey, we could probably use some AI to help better manage our healthcare system or implement some programs in the school curriculum. So these are the kind of topics which are discussed through from IA. I put here a few other examples of supporting and funding organizations. One is very, very interesting. It's called MeTax. And basically, MeTax is a way to fund up to 70% of the hiring of PhDs and master's degree students for R&D projects by private companies. So let's say a lot of the labs I mentioned earlier are basically developing joint programs with Ivado, and they will use MeTax to finance a huge portion of the costs. To this can be added at the provincial level, the PROMPT program, which can finance up to 50% of all expenditures related to IT projects. So basically, you can see that Money is on the table at every level, at the university level, at the government level, but also on the private sector side. Now, let me take a little step back and speak about one thing which is dear to our heart here in Montreal, and it's the what we like to call AI for good, or AI for humanity. Basically, in Montreal, there's a key component, something that is the backbone of the industry, meaning that we want what is developed here at in our universities and our labs to be used for good, right? So we want to make sure that the technologies and the innovation that comes out of the initiatives sponsored and financed by the universities and the governments will use for humanity, for good purposes for humanity. So we have the International Observatory on the Societal Impacts of AI, which is a key organization in the region. It acts as a main forum of discussion between the universities in Quebec. I think it has now 18 universities and colleges, mostly universities. Basically, they gather around and they make sure that the research chairs and the programs that they develop fit with that idea. But what's more interesting is that all the institutions I mentioned, for example, Mila and Ivado, did co-sign in 2018 a declaration for responsible AI. So basically, this declaration is aimed at representing the template of what worldwide AI for good should be like, right? So this was implemented, as I said, about almost 3.5 years ago, and it now has a significant number of signatories. But what's more interesting is that it was used for the foundation of a brand new international organization, which has been founded by Montreal International, but obviously we don't manage it. We just kickstarted the process. It's now living by its own means, but we helped launch the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence and what is now the International Center of Expertise for the Investment of Artificial Intelligence, which is the GPAI part in Montreal. Just to give you an idea of how the collaboration spirit is important to us, we did not want the only head of that organization to be in Montreal. So we started conversation with numerous other cities worldwide, and it was decided that the second head of that organization would be located in Europe, in Paris, to make sure that what happens in Montreal doesn't stay in Montreal. We want to make sure that it's diffused and that it launches a global conversation on the topic. So obviously choosing an EU country as the spearhead of the GPAI in Europe was very, very strategic for us. And again, there are two main mandates. So basically the responsible use of AI and data governance are key to the activities of those organizations. What's great is that not only the Quebec government and the Canadian government have given money, but also the private sector and the academic world. So obviously some funding came from Europe as well, and the OECD now has been involved thanks to the fact that they now house the secretariat in Paris. So basically, as you can see, this collaborative spirit goes way beyond Montreal, right? We like to see our ecosystem as a part of a global chain. Now, I told you about the Mila, which is key, but other organizations and institutions are also active in fundamental research around specific topics. One of which, and it's been growing very fast over the past few years, is the climate crisis. So a lot of the artificial intelligence work that's done now at some institutions have been financing initiatives to try to solve the environmental challenges that the world is currently facing. So basically, this is a very good example of how we want to use AI for humanity, AI for good. Now, a bit more generally speaking, Montreal is a thriving hub for startups. You know, Montreal is the second largest city in the country, behind Toronto. But what's very interesting is that more than $8 billion has been spent in venture capital in Montreal, which is a huge number by Canadian standards. And even if we're the second largest city, 6 out of Canada's 10 most active venture capital funds are actually based out of the city. This is thanks to the fact that we have an amazing startup scene, very active in B2B software and digital creative industries, but also obviously in artificial intelligence. We have accelerators and incubators which are dedicated to the industry, such as Next AI, and other such as Santec, Nutman House, and La Piscine are very, very proactive in that field. I know we still have here Techstar AI, which has been one of the main assets that we had on that field, but they slowed down their activities over the past year. I think they're in the process of restructuring a few of their global activities in general. I cannot end the presentation without speaking of how great Montreal is as a city. Montreal is a very nice place to live. We are the best city to live in Canada, the second best city to live in North America. We're amongst the best cities in the world, one of the best city to study as well. It's truly a bridge between Europe and North America. So in the sense that you find here a North American business environment, very, very flexible, easy to handle, direct access to a $500 million people's market. Thanks to the trade agreement that we have with the United States and Mexico, plus obviously all the trade agreements beyond. But you also find that quality of life that you have in Europe with a very, very wide social safety net, with public services which are really strong, public school, public healthcare, and so on. And you also have this vibe of Europe thanks to the density of the city, which is twice as dense as other cities in North America. So it truly has in the central neighborhoods this kind of European feeling, which, you can find. The downtown area is very, very, very well occupied. So I'm mentioning that because very often attracting challenge is an issue. Well, keep in mind that Montreal is a very nice place to live, the most affordable city amongst the largest metropolitan areas in North America. So it's a city where it's possible to live, where you find a thriving cultural environment, and which is that bridge between Europe and North America. So that was it for me. I think I took exactly 20 minutes. So I hope that was helpful. You can see my email here. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be very happy to answer your questions, especially if you have projects in North America, how you could develop it. And I'll be very happy to explain how to do it. You can also add me on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn being a very, very helpful tool for connecting. And I hope to make it next year, in person. Yeah. So I'll wait the invitation, Betul. I'll make sure to stay in touch on that front.